ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second ordinary meeting of the 168th session of the Queen's University Belfast Literary and Scientific Society. So, a little introduction to our society. We are Queen's University Belfast's oldest society, founded in 1850 originally as a paper reading society, and then we decided to ditch papers and go auditory. Since then, our gender representation has vastly improved. I'd like to say it has. It's true. It's true. Yes. So.
I was more like a kitten, but.
Yes. So now we do debates. We debate masterfully. No pun intended. Yeah. So. I can't even think what to say now. Private members' business is what we usually start with. At this point of the debate, we ask members of the floor who might have a small issue they'd like to talk about, stand up, maybe bat around ideas, stand up and say something like, so, Jeremy Corbyn, what's going on there? So if anyone has an issue they'd like to talk about, maybe get a sort of mini debate started. If you'd like to put up your hands and we'll get to it.
Yes.
You there, sir, you member.
Jeremy Corbyn, what's Labour Party's official policy in Trident?
Interesting. Would anyone like to respond to that? Anyone at all? I thought it was quite controversial.
Are you asking us to decide it now?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they outsourced it to us right now.
This is how Labour is going to, manage their policy from now on. So, anyone? I don't know. Is that a hand up from?
No one's got.
Right, no problem. Anyone else have any other private members' business they want to address? Yes, Mr. Pratt, our tech officer.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask the floor and Mr. Chairman whether they view that debates should be fact-checked. This has been a recent point of controversy in the US election, and I would like to get the floor's opinion on the matter.
Does anybody have an opinion on that? Hopefully one that has a fact to it. Mr. Dare?
Well, this was a problem that came last election cycle in the United States. Whenever Romney brought the question, that was fact-checked on the spot, and then later on it turned out that actually the moderator's position was ambiguous. Namely, they stated that they would not address the terrorist organisations fighting in Iraq at the time as radical Islamic organisations, and Romney said that Obama had not called them as such. But what had literally happened was the moderator had almost just trawled through his document and looked for the term radical Islamic, when in reality was that he did state it as radical Islam as an amorphous problem, but what Romney was specifically addressing was whether Obama had called them as such in a State of the Union address, which he actually was a position that most Republicans in America believe, but most Democrats don't believe. So the problem with having a moderator that takes a definitive stance on issues and quizzes it is it suddenly takes an impartial position and creates them as a third debater as such, because what positions they drill specific candidates on and at what frequency and at what level is a statement considered truthful, which is actually a credible problem within US politics at the moment, is something that's left as a judgment call, not as an empirical fact. So I don't think they should. I think it's the role of debaters to be affirmative and to call out people on it. I don't think the moderator should be involved in that call.
I think we'll take one response from that, if anybody has a response to that. Mrs. Tara Puriyahi?
Yeah, just on that point, I don't think that's really valid for our society, because our council has to be impartial anyway during a debate, so surely we would just have the moderator as part of our council and then they would be impartial.
Thank you very much for that input. Do we want to take a vote on that? Would you like to propose a formal voting motion? Or a memorandum that you'd like to put forward?
Well, it wasn't my original intention to reflect it back onto the society itself, more general political discourse, because we have a lot of lies being thrown about at the moment, and I wouldn't accuse that of our honest members.
I feel like that's a loaded
Yeah.
a loaded statement. Are you accusing someone of Right, any more issues that we'd like to address? No? Then we'll move on to announcements. This year we have so much to offer our members. We have workshops, so many international competitions, both south of the border, across the water. We'll have workshops to supplement them so that if you don't have any speaking experience, you'll have ample opportunity to gain some over the course of this year. We'll also be having a pub crawl. We have a formal at Christmas, and we have a formal conversazione, as it's called, which is a fancy Italian term for formal, later in the summer. Apart from that, leading me on to my first announcement, the Irish Times is the most prestigious debating competition this side of the border and south of the border. It's an all-island competition open to all universities on the island. Entry for it is open right now, so if anyone is interested from our new to intake or our old, the closing date is tomorrow, which is admittedly a bit short notice because the Irish institutions down south start a few weeks earlier than that. So if anyone's interested, we are provisionally going to book 3 teams for that. Yes, Mr. Whiter.
A former winner of the Irish Times is decorated Irish comedian Dara O'Brien.
Dara O'Brien, yes, and one of our former presidents, Mr. Ian McCann, who's now in NLA. Mr. Orman. Yes, so the Irish Times, if anyone is interested in that, approach me or the Secretary, Mr. Whitehurst, at the end. We also have one election and one position that we are open for on the council as well. We're looking currently for a first-year representative to fill a vacancy on our council. This is it's not actually an elected position, it's an appointed position, just because we feel that's a bit unfair to leave first years open to an open election to people who don't really know them and they don't really know from the get-go. So the position is basically to allow first year to represent their cohort on the council. It allows them to have an active role in participating on the council, putting forward stuff that they think would be beneficial to the council, organising along with the council. So if anyone is interested in that, you have to nominate. You need to email me, with the name of one person who's to second your name. The deadline for that will be the 6th of October, which is, I think, is it next Thursday? I think it's next Thursday, yeah. So the deadline for nominations is next Thursday. The position will be announced the following Thursday, which is the 13th of October, I believe. In addition to that, we also have an elected position. Unfortunately, our external convener role became vacant over the summer. This role entails sort of organising teams to go along to competitions in the south, across the water, international competitions like the USI and World University debating competitions that we're hoping to go to in the next few years, sort of to line them up. They'll also have an active role in the council, be able to contribute and organise with the Irish Times and stuff like that. So the deadline for nominations for that position, again, you need someone to second your name, will be the 10th of October, which is the week after next, with the election being held on the 13th of October. So at this point, I probably think it's a good idea to announce some of the positions on our council. So I'll start with myself. I'm Benjamin Murphy. I'm the president of the 168th session. I quite like Paisley. This sort of Paisley, not. Yeah. So I sort of run the council and make sure I'm sort of the Battermeister, I believe is probably the formal term for it. Secretary, my honourable secretary is Mr. Rob Whitehurst. He looks after the minutes of each week's debates, reads out the minutes. He'll be doing that after me right now, actually, of the previous debate that we held. He also organises pretty much everything to do with the council around our council meetings that take place on 5 o'clock on a Monday. Sort of keeps a written record and archives all of the debates, audio recordings and stuff like that. Who should I announce next? Our treasurer, Mr. Jeremy Muller, if you'd like to stand up and wave to people. Is our official bean counter and looks after the books and runs us very efficiently. Thank you very much for that, because we have lots of money, thankfully. Well, comparatively so. Who should I announce next? Who should I embarrass next? Internal, yes, which is Miss Liliana Vetter, standing over there, sitting over there, and holding a cat and looking a bit like a
Sorry,
James Bond film. She organises our term card and pretty much every internal meeting. She gets us organised to organise each internal meeting every week. What does it you do as well?
I don't know, so much. Christmas dinner, formal, freshers fair thingy.
Oh yeah, that.
All
Forgot about
sorts
that.
of stuff.
And thank you very much for that. Our next position is second year rep, I think, which is Mr. Peter Dunn, who's over there. Yes, wave to the people, smile. Yes, our second year representative, I'm pleasing the name, represents second years. Any issues that second year members of the society have, he represents their interests at formal meetings of the council every Monday at 5 o'clock. Also actively contributes to the running of the society. Yeah, and he's just generally good at crack as well, apparently. Our open representative is Dr. Craig Miller, MFF DFS SEAL, 50% off, buy now, sell later. Yeah, he's not actually here at the minute. He's a lovely chap. He represents our third years and postgraduates, represents our interests at council. Roughly the same as the second year rep, but for postgraduates and third years. And our final is outreach officer, which is Mr. Andrew Dillon, who's standing over there. Mr. Andrew Dillon organises the schools competition and also organises other external, sort of internal type stuff like debates with charities like Debating Matters, who will be holding their first debating competition here in, I think, a month. Yeah.
It's not their first, we've done it for like 4 years.
Yeah, when is it? Anyway, yes, so Irish Times, minutes, yes. So I think now we'll move on to the minutes from our last meeting, which was the first ordinary meeting of the semester, where we debated this House would hold a second EU referendum, and I welcome the Secretary, Mr. Rob Whitehurst, to read them out.
Hello everyone, I'm glad that we're all in fine form this evening. I apologise for the late change of room. You've done very well to get over here. We found out that the room was double booked, and we thought we might be able to collude with the society that had booked the room. We thought maybe there might be reasonable people who might be willing to move, and then we discovered that it was the Orange Society. The annual Freshers Mixer debate of the Literary and Scientific Society took place on the 22nd of September and was attended by 42 members. Private members' business was heard from Miss Sophie Stratford, who remarked that after swearing at a debate 11 months ago, she had finally brought her bottle of port fine for the House to enjoy. On the subject of foul language, President Murphy was asked to list all of the unacceptable swear words in alphabetical order. His riposte of Lib Dem was well received. Mr. Calvin Black then reminded all those in attendance that we do indeed record our debates in order to make them freely available on iTunes, and Dr. Craig Miller questioned the members of the House to consider taking part in the Irish Times debating competition. President's questions were heard from Mr. Johnny Finlay, who asked President Murphy what he had for breakfast. The riposte of kebab pizza was not well received. Mr. Finlay then asked the House if he wished to extend a warm welcome to both human and feline members of the House, as President Emeritus Poor Yahya had brought along 2 tiny kittens for the occasion, as she has done once again tonight. Messrs. Miller and Spratt then asked the President if he could make America great again, and his opinion of Tim Farron, respectively. Mr. Jamie Hanna commented that he once met the Lib Dem leader and spoke to him about Thin Lizzy. Meanwhile, Mr. Calvin Black asked the House if Jeremy Corbyn's re-election was by now a certainty. The answer was a resounding probably. President Murphy then announced the evening's motion that this House would hold a second EU referendum. Opening for the proposition was Mr. Jamie Hanna, who spoke from the room when he proclaimed, "I have no idea what's going on." He asserted that what we need is an informed referendum whereby the British public had some idea of the deal that we would be getting. He claimed that currently, if we want to remain in the single market, we would have to consent to the free movement of people within the European Union, something which convinced many voters to vote leave in the first place. He pointed to the example of the Republic in Ireland and Denmark as to where multiple referenda have successfully taken place and pleaded with the House to follow their example. Opening for the opposition was Mr. Jonathan Finlay, who claimed that thus far the proposition had been laying out his argument for him. Referenda, or referendums, if you will, are a democratic fantasy and a surefire way to undermine the elected government who are elected to make these sorts of decisions, rather than throwing it open to the country and shrugging their shoulders. He asserted that even if we did want to have a second EU referendum, the conditions for one had not yet been met. He concluded by saying that that referenda bully Parliament and that democracy decides the government, not the governance. Continuing with the proposition was main speaker Mr. Jack Armstrong. He opened by stating that the 23rd of June 2016 was a disastrous day for British politics. The sickening crescendo of misinformation and scaremongering brought about by flagrant dishonesty, opportunism and political point scoring from both sides. He decried the Leave campaign's claim that Turkey will be joining the EU by 2020, responding that no one in their right mind really believed that that would happen. He told the House that it was treated more like an election than a referendum, in how both sides brought forward what was essentially a manifesto for what might happen if they got their way. He concluded that we need a second referendum accompanied by an independent body which would fact-check both sides to ensure the public knew the consequences. Speaking secondly for the opposition was Mr. Ryan Neal, who opened with the legal parameters of what constitutes holding a second referendum, that being a significant change in the electorate or the circumstances. He asserted that this wouldn't happen for a number of years, as the Labour Party won't be affecting the electorate anytime soon, and that what we have now is essentially the same government and circumstances as previous, with Theresa May in the place of David Cameron. He concluded by saying that the matter must go through Parliament rather than holding a second referendum, which would only serve to devalue referenda in general. Concluding for the proposition was Dr. Craig Miller, who claimed that what happened in June was not democracy, and that he'd rather pay more taxes than be in the EU. He claimed that Boris Johnson should be in prison, that democracy as we know it lies dying and hyperventilating on the floor of the Commons, and that we need a political equivalent of the General Medical Council, where politicians who lie can be struck off. He concluded by saying that we need a second referendum to decide whether the EU engages in a hard or a soft Brexit, before asserting that he was always looking for a hard one. Concluding for the opposition and so the debate was Miss Sophie Stratford. He claimed that the proposition had failed to define the terms of the debate and that, while Boris Johnson's imprisonment is certainly an interesting topic which should be discussed, it isn't relevant to the EU question. She stated that the proposition's argument was the bad loser response and that, in any case, under the current government, a second EU referendum simply will not happen until a seismic shift in public or government opinion occurs. Questions are heard from Mo Musa, Chris Spratt, Richie Gallagher, Mo Musa again, Hugh Donovan and Robert Clark. A vote based on the opinion of the House was taken which read 4 ayes, 13 nays and 3 abstentions. Meanwhile, a casting vote based on Speaker's performance on the motion this House would hold a second EU referendum was taken which read 1 aye, 13 nays and 5 abstentions. May I take the minutes as read?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whitehurst. I just realised I forgot not one but 2 items of business before I went to the minutes, which Ms. Williams just reminded me of. In terms of business from the Freshers' Fair, we have the winner of the raffle from the tins, and I believe you have the jar with names for me to take one out.
Good luck to everyone who entered. Also, the motion that won was Trident, just so everyone knows. So there'll be a Trident debate later in the year.
Explosive.
I think that says Christ, but I can't actually read it. Christine, maybe?
It just says Christ.
Well, Christ wins.
The Lord weren't moved in mysterious ways.
Let's go for another one, since Christ isn't here.
It's not It's technically everyone.
It's in everyone, you know. Ben C.
Ben C. Ben
Right,
C.
this is going well.
Is there another room?
Well, maybe you'll have more luck.
Yes.
Who's that? Paul Ahern.
Paul Ahern.
Always look at the
Fourth
I
time's
don't
a
think
charm.
that's Paul Ahern. Paul Ahern.
Lochran?
Might be.
Is it
I
Lochran?
don't think it's not spelled the same.
We're in here, yes.
Also,
Lagan?
God knows.
Also needed
See if I can pronounce it. Shay, someone? No, anyone called
Shay Glasgow?
Glasgow, it is Glasgow, yeah.
We can email them.
Yes.
Come on, let's give up.
We'll leave it.
Shay Glasgow's one. At least we know who that is.
Super.
There you go, that's everything.
Yes, so we need one round of applause for the person who's not even in the room. I also forgot to announce this shadowy figure at the back of the room, who is our final council member, our tech officer for the year, Mr. Chris Spratt.
No one else got a round of applause.
No, yeah, but I forgot to mention him, so I feel bad now. So final item of business before we move on to the debate and the rules of the debate. President's questions. If anyone has any questions for me, pressing matters to attend to, anything at all, Mr. Adair?
What do you have for breakfast?
To be fair, like, I knew that I wasn't going to be eating for most of the day, so I went to Chipco at 11 o'clock this morning, and I asked if I could get chicken goujons, and he was like, "No, mate, it's breakfast right now. It's like Friday." Oh, okay, I'll take my business elsewhere then.
What did you have?
Just answer the question.
Technically, I had a chicken mayo sandwich at like 4:30 in the afternoon, so, proper university, really healthy diet, 20 or 5 a day.
Do you have the stamina to deal with it?
I thought you were just going to leave it there. What was that? Yes, yeah, I guess I do. So, moving on to the debate this evening. Oh, yes,
First and only left Gaelic debate, last. Where did you get your tag? Because you were talking about it being Paisley, but you never actually told us where you got it.
I'm not saying because you'll just think I'm really sad.
It's from online.
I got it off a website called Mrs. Bowtie, which specialises in specifically in Paisley bowtie. I've been in a book of
Paisley normal ties, or
it's like this particular pattern, so there's a bit of a Paisley fetish.
Very specialist.
Right, moving on to the debate tonight, this evening, which is this House would disaffiliate from NUS-USI. We use NUS-USI not to say we want to disaffiliate from the partnership, but to say that we want to disaffiliate from the overall structure of university governance. Before we get on to that, I'll just sort of briefly explain the rules of British parliamentary debating, just for all of our new members who may not be familiar with them. Yes, so through our constitution, all speeches must be addressed through the chair. So if you don't begin with your speeches with Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, members of the House, then I can't actually acknowledge that you've begun speaking. Arcade, though that might seem. Yes, so we have specific names for each speaker on either side of the floor because each speaker has a particular role to play in the debate. So the first speaker for the proposition is referred to as the Prime Minister. May he never be Prime Minister, hopefully. Same with Mr. Harrigan. The second speaker for the opposition is Deputy Prime Minister, obviously, and then we have on the opposition the Leader of the Opposition and Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Normally, if we had larger teams on either side of 3 or 4 speakers, we would have the Chief Whip and the Deputy Chief Whip, whose jobs are basically to sort of summarise what the first 2 opening speakers of both Prop and Op have said. So they're supposed to sort of neatly summarise what their team, the arguments that the team have made. Moving on to points of information. Speeches are 7 minutes long. The first and last minute are protected, which means that no one can stand up in the midst of your speech and raise a point of information or ask a question of you. In the middle of 5 minutes, you're allowed to stand up and say, on that point, sir, and then sort of raise a question with them. They can choose to accept it or not. If they don't accept it, I'd ask you to politely sit down and wait. And they will either defer your point of information or just ignore you. Try not to have too many points of information going on one after another, so leave a gap of about 10 seconds just so that you're not like seriously interrupting the flow of whoever's speaking. If you support a point, because it's sort of British parliamentary style, you sort of emulate what happens in Prime Minister's question time. If you support a point and you think someone's made a particularly valid point, you can go here, or if they said something that you find despicable or outrageous, or say shame, resign, particularly the resign part, We like to think we have a much greater sense of decorum than the Westminster system, so no casual acts of wanton sexism like calm down dear and everything like that. Yes, so names. That's pretty much all the rules I can think of for now. I'll probably make up a few as I go along. No, not really. So, without further ado, we'll get into the motion for this evening. This House for this is related to the NUS. And the first speaker is the Prime Minister of Opposition, Mr. Nathan Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, ladies, gentlemen, and honourable kittens. I firstly must apologise at the state of this speech because I took up the mantle of this last night and I've been at work all day. So I will go for this and we'll see how we go on. So first of all, before I get into the argument, I want to specify the way in which I believe that we should disaffiliate and the conditions that would have to be there before I would argue that. Firstly, we should not disaffiliate from NUS USI until this funding is sorted, because it's a very important time and we need to get that issue sorted, and having and disaffiliating at this stage would be detrimental. Secondly, a national student movement for Northern Ireland is something that I do support, and I think it's something that we should argue for. 3, good links with student movements in the United Kingdom, in the NUS, and ROI USI is something that I think is essential. The 4th thing is NUS USI do make valuable contributions to CUPSUN, Queen's University Students' Union. We can't deny that. And 5, we should have a clear road ahead before disaffiliation. We shouldn't just say disaffiliate and not have a clear road ahead. So, the problem. So I'm going to specify the problem that we have at NUS USI. Firstly, NUS USI depends very heavily on one person, and that's the president. And upon that one person hangs the rest of NUS. When we have a very diligent and a very good president, NUS USI works very, very well. But when we do not have an efficient and effective president, the whole thing goes to the dogs. Sorry, guys. But it really does. It goes to the dogs because, and all that does is it affects our reputation as a student movement to Stormont. And NUS USI, for that reason, has been treated, and amongst all the parties, is treated less seriously than actually the local unions, whether that's UU or Queen's Students' Union. And that is part of the problem. Now, the other thing is with having that one president very heavy.
Can I ask a question?
You may.
Is the president appointed or elected?
The president is appointed by the delegates. So he is appointed by the delegates.
He or she?
Yes, he or she. You could pay, but here's the other thing that I would say on that point, sir. You could pay an extra sabbatical for the price of NUS USI and would do the job just as effectively and would be more accountable to local members. Because on that point, see, the other problem with NUS USI is it is a small number of delegates from the university unions who actually scrutinise.
Question?
Give me 1 second before I finish. Who scrutinise that. Whereas actually you look at these lovely sabbatical officers around about you. There are 100 plus councillors who can scrutinise them, and actually not just that, any student member can actually go and ask a question of their president, and that is something that does not happen with NUS USI. Yes.
Question: are the delegates who elect the president, are they appointed or are they elected by students?
I have no doubt in saying that they're elected, but you do not have the mechanism for students to ask of the. Right, NUS USI is therefore lacking an element of accountability, because who calls the council meetings? It's the president. And that is a big problem with the democratic accountability of NUS USI. Whereas when it comes to Queen's Students' Union, and you look at that, who calls the meetings? Actually, they're specified. NUS USI is also disconnected from students, and that is something that we can see from the very fact of the voting turnout for NUS USI. Whenever you, the referendum, compared to say the Save Our Subjects referendum, it's something that really engaged students, but NUS USI referendum did not. Another thing I would say as well is NUS USI is also susceptible to a university, a small group of university students taking over, because as rightly was pointed out, yes, while they are elected, the elections of their delegates aren't as well turned out as, say, the elections to the student council or the sabbatical elections. And member unions are, by and large, are flagging in their commitment. You know, there's FE colleges and higher education colleges, and a lot of them do not actually turn up to the meetings. There is something wrong at the heart of NUS USI. Now, the solution. I think that NUS USI is unreformable. I've been for about 9 years, and we've not seen too many reforms in that time, despite many attempts. I think we need to disaffiliate and rebuild, because if Queen's pulls out being one of the main funders, it will then have to, that will focus minds. And finally, NUS USI, actually, both, and I have to say this, both the National Union Students and the Union Students of Ireland actually focus to give us a better deal, because they do not want to have a situation where Northern Ireland does not have a representation. And actually, when we did threaten to disaffiliate, you found NUS USI threw loads and loads of cash at us to ensure that we stayed. In fact, the president at the time was very sceptical of the NUS and asked all these pretty unreasonable demands, and they were all met. So at that stage he couldn't pull out. But I think that's the best thing that we need to do. It's unreformable. We need to disaffiliate and rebuild, and NUS USI will therefore give us a better deal. And I come back so long as the first 5 points and conditions are met. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The House now recognises the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Oisin Hassan. It was Conor Daly, sorry, is the Leader of the Opposition.
Nope.
Every 3 years, Queen's students are given a chance by referendum to decide whether to remain a member of the NUS USI or to disaffiliate. My heart goes out to the great team at NUS USI. It must feel like the Brexit debates on loop. Each referendum campaign, a bit like Brexit, will see some students argue that membership isn't worth it. What has the NUS USI ever done for us, they ask. Rather than ask what are the opportunities, they bemoan the status quo. Let's take back control. Instead of our QUB, NUS USI, Britain, EU, national, continental comparisons, let's relate QUB, NUS USI to local and national institutions and representation. Two levels of representation that no democracy can properly function without. Locally, we have Queen's Students' Union, its elected representatives and support staff dealing with local issues, often firefighting, academic issues, concerns over student welfare are tackled face to face, there and then. Across the road at the Students' Union, we see everyday wins for students, their academic performance, their living standards, their physical, mental and emotional well-being. As members of NUS USI, Queen's and neighbouring unions have a greater opportunity to be more strategic in the regional and national level in terms of public policy, in terms of the media, and to set the political agenda. What NUS USI, the coming together of students and representatives at Queen's and for other further and higher education institutions, what that brings is three things: synergy, collaboration, coherence in message, and political clout, influence. No, thank you. Without NUS USI, first of all, let's talk about synergy. Without NUS USI, without a president of the unions and team at NUS USI, there would be no official coming together, no coordination in thought, strategy, or in practice for serving, helping, and advising students. Instead, QEBSU and other unions would work in silos, continuously firefighting issues of the day. Of course, informal conversations will be had, but who is to say university unions will speak up for hard-pushed students in other unions, or in other colleges, or for would-be apprentices, or vice versa? NUS USI guarantees synergy and equal footing for all members, a voice for every student and institution and its officers, sharing NUS USI's core mission of putting students at the heart of everything it does. When NUS USI campaigns for better academic feedback, improved tenant agreements with landlords, and better disabled access provision, they campaign for and with every student. Synergy means in it together. No union or student left behind. NUS USI brings coherence and a force for good. During the darkest days of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, the coming together of students showed the next generation of leaders would be united by shared interest and shared future, not divided or damned by violence. NUS USI continues to succeed in providing one coherent voice on academic and socio-economic change in Northern Ireland, not just in keeping the current cap on tuition fees. It has provided a coherent argument on protecting EMA, educational maintenance allowance, advocating better transport deals for students, campaigning to end zero-hour contracts, ending the ban on homosexuals to donate blood in Northern Ireland, and also bringing Northern Ireland into line with the rest of the UK and Ireland in campaigning for same-sex marriage. Sure, students' unions at Queen's and elsewhere, if they don't come together, could try doing this all on their own. But in acting alone, they would lack one of the NUS USI's greatest assets, and that's political clout and influence. In May, we saw the Northern Ireland Assembly election. Now we have a two-party executive coalition and an official opposition. On Monday, on Monday the 24th of October, Stormont will see its very first ever all-party group on students, a result of the political clout of NUS USI. The clout of Wales is a strong, united and strategic organisation. Look back to the lead-up of the election and see and take note of meetings that NUS USI leaders held with politicians of parties across the divide, and in statements you will discover the influence of the student movement, taken seriously by folks on the Hill, by MLAs and candidates, parties right across the spectrum, because they see NUS USI visibly as very serious and credible force, serious about winning on behalf of students. That's every student, young people studying, mature students, parents studying at Queen's, hoping to better themselves but still struggling to pay for childcare fees, nurses in danger of losing their bursaries. The NUS USI, the student movement, it can't win every battle, but its influence is clear. Its clout, Queen's clout, is clear as part of NUS USI. For Queen's to disaffiliate would be for QEB to give up and sit on the sidelines. To break ties with neighbouring unions would be to forfeit progress made at the regional and national level on academic opportunity, on socio-economic matters of the day. To disaffiliate would be for QEBSU to turn its back on synergies, to dismantle the coherence in the message that it has with neighbouring unions, and to take for granted the visible clout that NUS USI brings to every union and student. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daly. That was wonderfully on time, right on the button. We now welcome to the floor. Don't fall over. We now welcome to the floor the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Harry Day.
Evening, members of the House. Sorry for the cold right now. I'll try and suppress it for as long as I can. Before I get into the main points of my speech and wrap up just why it is important that we send a message to disaffiliate, I'll first get into some rebuttals that I wanted to address. Right now, the main argument is that NUS USI represents a common political front for students' agendas. However, as my colleague, the Prime Minister, has stated, that is not the case. It's been failing. It's been failing continuously. The tuition fees are on the verge, on the precipice of being upped. Student conditions have been in decline. And ultimately, politicians do not see our student politicians as a credible force, and credible, recognised movement to be negotiated with. So simply put, it's failing. We need to disaffiliate, and we need to build up an alternative that can actually get the job done. So, first of all, to address the main point, at the heart of why we must disaffiliate, we must state the multiple policies that are beginning to suppress our own ability to negotiate in an academic fashion. The establishment of safe space policies, both here and at the national level, has, for all intents and purposes, suppressed the free exchange of ideas in what should be the open marketplace of academic debate. It's gone so far now that our own Prime Minister has come out and stated that such safe space policies have come to suppress both economic innovation and the free academic discourse. Simply put, these policies have led to a situation where students feel the need to self-censor their own ideals out of fear of academic and bureaucratic repercussions that they might hold for having such opinions.
On that point, sir.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Is the Speaker not confusing safe spaces with no platforming policy?
I'm going to get to no platforming, but well addressed. No bargain. Such safe space policies are complemented by a national no platforming policies, which most recently took the limelight whenever individuals such as the gay rights campaigner Peter Thatchell and I think it's Jermaine Greer were also found under the guise of such policies. The concept is, simply put, absurd. Why should the most free place in a country feel the need to explicitly ban individuals from sharing their own ideas? What do we, as supposedly the most educated and best informed, have to fear from the proliferation of ideas that we have not even considered before tacitly agreeing for disconnected individuals to state them? And that gets into my next point. Ultimately, year in year, the participation from the student body has remained low, sub 20%, in outside of democratic direct referendums which affect them. This is ultimately evidence that the student movement is not addressing issues that the student body themselves consider important, both at a student union level and now, as we're addressing, the national level. So what to do? Well, go ahead.
Are you telling me students should not be trusted to appoint their own representatives to make policies?
No, what we're saying is the current status quo of having a national organisation of delegates which appoint a national president is insufficient. We need to replace it, and that will come once we've laid a roadmap for how to disaffiliate. One point. So, to conclude, at what point do we consider a limit on the ideas and the concepts of which we're allowed to discuss? At which point do we assess that we've reached a pinnacle, a limit to what we as students can consider normal and reasonable ideas? that is what I'm going to give to the House. And so, to summarise, NUSI has clearly acted in a way which is not sufficiently represented and negotiated on behalf of students. It's failed to block reforms which will negatively impact students in the near future, and it lacks accountability, crucially, towards their own student body, of which they're so disconnected from. And on that note, I beg the House to disaffiliate from the NUS.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Gara. The House now welcomes the last speaker tonight, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Rashid.
Thank you, Chair. I think what a lot that was said there was sort of very sweeping statements. Lots of talk about failing to block reforms, failing to stand up for students. I think was sort of the undercurrent there. And I want to address some of that, what I'm about to say. But I think I'll start with maybe addressing actually what is it we're talking about, what is NUS USI, because I don't think that's been laid out. I actually think there's been some confusion as to what the organisation is. It's the regional body here in the north of Ireland, Northern Ireland, your preferred description. Hannah's looking at me because I don't normally say the word Northern Ireland. NUS USI is the regional body made up under what is known as the trilateral agreement. So that's why it's got NUS, which is NUS UK, and USI, which is the Union of Students in Ireland. It was way ahead of its time whenever it was negotiated. It brought together that recognition that a collective body of students was stronger together. And actually, whenever we were in this really heated environment here in a small region of the world, actually looking and reaching out to other sides of us was a better way to do things. It was way ahead of Stormont. It was way ahead of the Good Friday Agreement by a good 20 years at least. And that's the thing. That stronger together argument, which I don't normally adhere to in my everyday politics. It recognises that there's a problem there, that there's a need for a larger student voice. And that is the thing, as one of the sabbatical officers in the Student Union, I do work on the day-to-day policy issues that we have the privilege here in Queen's to be able to work on, because we here in this part of the world are the only single union. UU is split across 4 campuses. Every FE, their FE students make up far more than our students do. It's 250,000 students. There are only 17,000 full-time students in Queen's. So we're in a privileged position that we can sit here and talk about this affiliation from the national voice. We can talk about it. The FEs don't have that luxury. For the first time, and it's as a result of NUS USI lobbying, there will be the first ever sabbatical officer in FE College in the North. That's incredible. And then that's a sort of lobbying effort that going on and on the ground in student unions is incredibly important, because it allows them to start to build that welfare and academic front that they normally cannot do. We have that privilege here. We have 5 full-time officers who work on the day-to-day, the minutiae almost, in comparison to the national level. Yes, there are problems. I recognise that there are problems. Many of them were laid out. I recognise that actually, in terms of democracy, the national unions are failing. They are not engaging students well, and so are the local unions. But if we have to change a lot of the firepower that I spend my time working on the local issues, as was mentioned, I just do not have time, neither do our team, have time to lobby on the national issues. And actually, what's the point of splitting up? What's the point of this affiliation? Because then we're all saying different things. Every union's saying something different. Politicians don't take very lightly to that, and they're not going to react to the change that we need to see. Yeah.
I don't think either of us have said that we feel there should be a vacuum at the national level for student interests. However, we do state that the current infrastructure is not there to support it.
I'll come to that point then. What's the point of this affiliation? When's the next time that we're going to come back to this? If we disaffiliate as a union ourselves as QBSU, we walk away from a national union that represents thousands upon thousands, millions of students. When are we going to negotiate this new body? Where's this going to come from? It's a figment of the imagination, actually. It hasn't been laid out here today what that actually looks like. We reform it from within. I recognise that that's difficult, and because of the problems with actually democratic engagement with the organisation, that's not going to be easily done. I recognise that one full-timer does bring with it its problems, one president. But let's talk about it this way, and actually it was said that we could pay for another sabbatical officer in the Student Union. We do need another sabbatical officer in the Student Union, but that's another discussion. Actually, it may surprise some of you, and you may all decide to vote to disaffiliate whenever I say this, but the cost to Queen's Student Union of affiliation to 3 national unions is £52,000 a year.
that could be 3 sabbatical officers or 2 full-time paid staff members. But that affiliation brings with it hundreds of full-time staff across the UK and Ireland, and 2 full national executives, plus the 1 full-time president who's based here in Belfast, who can work with the unions on the ground in the north. It's not about NUS USI itself. NUS USI is a recognition that we're weaker as a region, we're weaker as a voice of students because of our own context. It's about that national voice across the UK and Ireland, and that's what's so incredibly important about NUS USI. And that's why I throw out there in openness and transparency that yes, it costs us £52,000 a year, but that money is well worth it, because the access to resource and support that we can get through that is incredible. The access to government that we get through that we do not actually have the time to do, is incredible. It's incredibly important, and I don't believe that the national unions are viewed with any disdain in the House of Commons or in Stormont or in Dublin and the Dáil. Yes, there are problems there, and yes, I suppose with quite what's seen as a left-wing campaigning body with a Tory government in power, obviously there are going to be differences of opinion, but I still think there's a lot of access there, and there's still important conversations being had. In actual fact, the Education Act that allowed, if I'll just finish my point, the Education Act in 1994 that enshrined the rights of students' unions in England and Wales to autonomy and a right to funding from their institution, that was done at the time of a Conservative government. So actually, the argument is not there. We need to have that national voice, we need to have that campaign voice, and I will take the point.
What if we don't want certain of your representatives to go in front of the media and in front of the Parliament and state a set of views which are not representative? I watched an NUS representative on Newsnight at the time of the student riots explain why throwing a fire extinguisher off a 6-storey building was okay, and it distracted away from an issue that's going to cost me £27,000 over the space of my time at university.
I mean, any one of us could say something that we don't agree with, and any one of us could have an elected representative that we don't agree with what they say. And this is the thing, yes, there is a disconnect between the democracy on the ground and the democracy at the higher level, but we should be talking about how to improve that as a collective student voice. You should be telling me, as an officer in your union, I want you to hold these people to account. Actually, you should be running to be a delegate to go to the conferences, hold these people to account. It's incredibly important. It's about accountability. Walking away and saying, this doesn't work for me, is not the way to campaign on national issues. Yes, I disagree with many of the stances that some of the full-time officers take in NUS, for example. That does not mean I'm going to stand here and tell you, make yourselves weaker by voting to disaffiliate. And on that note, I will finish.
Thank you very much, Mr. Preston. That means all of our speakers are finished. I'd like to give all the speakers a round of applause this evening. And another round of applause for Mr. Daly, who I believe is a maiden speaker and has never actually spoken in this institution before, so congratulations. And actually Oxford as well. At this point, we move to questions from the floor. We'll have 3 rounds of questions, 3 to the proposition, then to the opposition, and then we'll just take sort of abstaining questions on the motion, if anyone has any points on the actual wording of the motion or things that they don't believe were addressed by either side. So we'll start off with questions to the proposition. Yourself, sir?
Robert Clark. The Prime Minister made quite a lot of fuss about the lack of accountability of the President. I'd just like to ask, firstly, who is the President? And secondly, are there examples you can give of presidential overreach?
Sorry, presidential
overreach.
Overreach. Well, thank you very much. Well, the President is Fergal. What's his surname?
McPhair.
That's right. Fergal's a good guy. This is not a personal thing, because I actually think Fergal's a good guy. I actually think he's a good sabbatical officer and he's a good representative. My issue comes from more the wider principle of having trusting in one person. Also, I don't have to specify a specific example of overreach. It's the point of the potential for overreach. And I think that in any system of government or governance, there's proper accountability, because the problem is we think that nothing is going to happen. We think that we can trust people, and then somebody breaches that trust. I'll give you an example that David Cameron would never run a referendum if he thought for one moment that that we wouldn't have left the EU. So sometimes you can put your trust and say everything's going to be fine, but it doesn't work out that way. So it's accountability, it's more of a principle. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. If the opposition would like to respond, you have an opportunity if you'd like to.
Yeah, I'll take that actually. It's a point that I was going to make actually in response to detail a bit more my feelings on what the Prime Minister said about one full-time officer. And yes, standards can vary in elected representatives, and standards can vary year to year considering we only take post for a year at a time. And that is true. That is true of any USI, but that's true of every student union. That's true of our own student union. And in the end of the day, that's also true of any government in the world. Standards and how people do things and their approach to things change. I don't think that's an argument for affiliation. I think that's an argument for more engagement with the process and more engagement with the democratic powers that are put there in place for students to actually leverage. I do think our students need to engage more, and like I said, we are in a privileged position as one large student union in an urban setting, with most of our full-time students all around us. And actually, maybe there's more work to be done on our part to engage students in the work of NUS whenever we're the ones seeing them face to face every day. But in terms of that democratic process to elect the president, that's incredibly important. I certainly don't think that's an argument for affiliation.
Thank you for that. And if anyone has any questions for the opposition? Yourself? Would you like to state your name and stand up?
Conor my question, Mr. Chairman, members of the House, is to the members of the opposition, whoever wants to take it. Granted, I've spent the last three years in England at the University of Manchester, so my comments more come from the perspective of the NUS rather than the NUS USI, which, to be fair, before tonight I hadn't heard of. You say that these student unions these national student unions aren't seen as jokes by politicians, but the fact is that Jack Straw, who's a former MP for the Labour Party, former Home Secretary and Foreign Secretary, and former President of the NUS, described the organisation as a joke. Theresa May has come out and said that its CSFA's policies are a joke. These politicians, they do not take the NUS seriously. They see them as reactionary left-wing parties. The NUS itself in 2015 put up attack ads against the Liberal Democratic Party in key marginal constituencies, including the one I lived in Didsbury, Manchester. The fact is that these NUS students, as you have conceded, do not have a mandate from students. They're elected by so low a number of people that what they have is reactionary politics that does not engage with the vast majority of the student body, and it instead attacks small political parties and works solely with one party that they believe in. They do not represent us all, and I do not think that the NUS across the UK can represent us all. I do not understand how a small body that I've never heard of until tonight can represent us at an executive level.
Well, first off, I would make the point that whereas Jack Straw is elected under the first past the post system in the UK, that is one MP per constituency. In Northern Ireland, particularly at the Northern Ireland Assembly, all politics is local. Each constituency there are 6 MLAs elected under the single transferable vote system, each relying on transfers if they don't get elected on the first count. So therefore they have there's a more of an onus on politicians to listen, to reach out to others and win those transfers. And that makes them more responsive to local issues, particularly from a united, coherent student movement. As I referred to in my presentation, in my debate, just before the elections here in Northern Ireland, we did have student leaders meeting with senior members of political parties right across the spectrum here, and that the result of those meetings was highlighted in manifestos of political parties. And as I mentioned in my debate, next month we'll see the first all-party group on students at the Northern Ireland Assembly. So that shows that in Northern Ireland, exposed to the likes of Jack Straw, who is in a safe seat somewhere, that politicians here listen. On low turnout, I think that our opposition across the table had, almost suggested let's not trust people to make their own decisions. Low turnout, just cancel everything. You gotta have a bit more faith in people. As I highlighted in in my debate, I said some people look at the opportunities, other people want to bemoan the status quo. The onus is on student politicians, student leaders to engage, to encourage people to get out and vote. It's like being on the ground. You can't just pick the elections or sit on the sidelines because things aren't working. Going back to the first point, politics is local in Northern Ireland. Second point, on turnout, it's up to students and student representatives to get involved.
Right, thank you for that. And now for abstention points on the motion, any sort of neutral points?
Did I not get to respond to the question?
Oh, yes, sorry, proposition, you didn't get to respond.
Yeah, I think I did touch on the NUS, at least the rest of the UK. On the, I think it was the Liar Liar campaign, the attack on the Liberal Democrats was one of the most cowardly pieces of policy I've ever seen in student politics. The Liberal Democrats, while I will say, did go back on their promise on student fees. That was a policy that was introduced by Labour originally. And not to mention that was £40,000 of resources that were spent burying the only party that actually saw students as a credible electoral force and included them in their election strategy. So I think that was a tremendous failure by student politicians on a national level to represent students. Also, since my point on turnout was also addressed, just because something is directly elected does not give them a mandate to represent the full student body, especially whenever you're talking the extremely low numbers of turnout which you do see in sabbatical elections. I will admit that is not necessarily fault of the infrastructure, but that is a sign that students simply don't care about it. So, yeah.
Thank you for that, Mr. Reader. So now abstention points on the motion, any neutral points? Things you felt weren't addressed by USI? Yourself, sir, Steve, maybe stand up?
John McAleenan. You mentioned a lot of low turnouts. What are the low turnouts that really occur?
Nationally, the sort of averages that you're looking at in sabbatical student union elections are around, I think, the average is 16%. I think last year here we were just shy of 20, so we were pretty impressed with that, but obviously whenever I say 20% turnout, you're probably looking at me going, he's mad, that's terrible. But nationally, I think it's about 16%. There is a problem with student democracy, and part of it is an awareness of what it can achieve. I believe fundamentally that that's the main problem. And that's definitely the problem when it comes to the national unions, because the national unions are not directly elected, they're elected by delegates at a conference. I do think there's a problem there. I do think there needs to be a very fundamental review, constitutional review across the three nations. But I certainly don't think that means that as a union ourselves we should be walking away.
Yeah. No, thank you. There's a lot there I would agree with. And we don't have to do the fact checker. He's right about the 20%. But no, seriously, I think the big issue is whenever you look at, say, the sabbatical elections, you're getting 20% of the student voice, right? Now that's not great. But whenever you go down to the national unions, you're talking a couple hundred out of 17,000. Now, what sort of representation? How can any organisation say at all whenever you're getting not even 1%? Not even 1% of people are supporting NUS USI. They're just totally disengaged. I think my point on turnout is that it's not to say that NUS USI is a bad thing because of this. What I'm saying is it's totally disengaged from its members, and because it's disengaged, how can we say that in and of itself is representative? And that is what we're meant to do. We're meant to represent people. And whenever we then have our president acting on our behalf, and he's represented by not even 1% of all students in this university, there's a problem, a major problem. And I think that we need to have a shake-up from bottom up, and that is why I am in favour of a disaffiliation and restarting afresh. And as I said, I think when I say restarting afresh, that is only when we have a clear, cohesive plan to go ahead. So in that context, then I would be in favour of disaffiliation.
Thank you for that, sir. And unfortunately, we're quite pressed for time, so I'm just going to take one more round of questions before we move to a vote. So if anyone has a question for the proposition again, raise your hand. Yes, yourself.
I just reached down on the point. A lot of things have been said about potential and fear, and on those points, surely again, the kind of Brexit analogy, is a restructuring, not much more sensible than a complete start over in terms of time, energy, resources, and all the things that would entail to completely disaffiliate and start again.
Yeah, I think to your point, I think I would actually sorry. What I would say is, for me, the big issue is this, right? It's whenever you look at Brexit, there was so many things that were thrown out. It was a totally ill-informed debate on both sides, and it was just the politics of fear. I totally agree with it. I hope tonight it hasn't been the politics of fear. I'm not saying, NUS, USI, if we don't disaffiliate, St Mary's may join, St Mary's is a member, but you wouldn't know it. But it never come up, and neither did Strandos, but not the attack. That would be her form. What I would say on the issue, on the issue that you've raised, I think the potential for, I just think in all structures they should be accountable. And all representative structures should be accountable, right? With finances, when it comes to power, it doesn't matter what structure it is, in principle, because the problem is you can, like most people, whenever they're given the chance to behave, will behave, but whenever you don't have the structures in place to safeguard against the people who won't behave, then that's a problem. And I think there is a major problem when it comes to the accountability of the NUS USI president when he is the one who calls the council that holds him accountable. I remember even Kieran Halferty, the president of NUS USI at the time, saying that to me, like, it's a major problem. And it's one problem that needs to, that's an example of a problem that needs to be resolved, right? But I think the second question was sort of regarding, starting up and reforming. Well, my attitude is, I've been involved in this for 9 years, and I've not seen much change to the structures in those 9 years. And many times we've tried to reform them, but it's failed. We've tried that. So my problem is, if we've tried this, and part of the problem is, you might get somewhere, and then one of the other unions says, no, and they can block it, right? Or another problem is as well, the other FE colleges, because it was mentioned there's more FE students, there's more FE representatives than higher education, further education colleges, than higher education colleges. Yet, so few of them turn out. Now there are complex reasons for that, but I think the best option here is to get serious as a student body and actually let NUS USI know there needs to be fundamental change, and the only way in which I think we can do that is by sending NUS and USI as part of that trilateral agreement is to say, actually we're disaffiliating, then they will take it seriously.
Anyone from the opposition want to respond?
Take this one. The conditions, because I think that's what your question premise of that, the conditions that were laid out for this affiliation were the HE funding crisis to be over. We need to continue to find a way to have links across the student movement in the UK and Ireland, and that we need a plan. But that's the point of affiliation, and you should say that's the point of national unions, to have a plan to deal with the HE funding crisis and to make those links with students. I don't think you're really arguing for disaffiliation. What you're arguing for is to make the threat of disaffiliation so we can start to resolve some of the problems. Potentially a good plan, but I don't think we should follow through with it. I do believe there are fundamental problems. There are fundamental problems, but actually, in terms of my experience, and some of you might know that Nathan was my predecessor 5 years ago as education. There's my immediate predecessor right there. And I think my experience has been a more positive one. St Mary's and Chanels, for example, do attend every meeting. They are at every regional council, and actually that level of engagement has started to change things. And the plan, if I could maybe just speak for any issues out for a second, I mean, dealing with the HE funding crisis, lobbying government directly, lobbying the Minister for the Economy. We're not in the higher education department anymore. Partly we're all under the economy, and that makes it it's a synergy in government. At the end of the day, we need plans, and NUS USI have a regional plan that we as a student body in one part of the north cannot do ourselves. And mental health, proper mental health research across all of our students. And part of that is engaging FE colleges. So let's just deal with the issue with FE colleges. The reason why they can't turn up is because they have no funding in the students' unions. They don't have sabbatical officers who are paid to do these jobs and to work for the students in their colleges. That's 200,000 people missing out on proper representation. And that's what an NUS USI president can do. The current one and the previous ones travel the length and breadth of the north, week in, week out, talking to those colleges and supporting them in a way that if we just go, we're going to Students' Union, I'm not paying that money anymore, well, actually, the impact that we would have on those students who we don't actively represent would be pretty devastating, because the infrastructure would collapse. NUS USI would collapse in the morning if Queen's Students' Union walked out. The thing is, if it's about having a plan to reform the thing, then let's have a plan to reform the thing. Let's not just walk away from it and hope that they'll all scramble around in the mess that we need and fix it. It's not how it works.
And one more question for the opposition. If you'd like to keep your question brief. You, sir?
Thank you. Peter Beck. Mr. Chairperson, I've learned quite a lot this evening, chiefly amongst staff, that a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of money is spent on the NUS USI. Would the opposition not agree that if that money was spent on, and in return for that money, we get political clout, if that money and time and energy was spent on encouraging students to vote in, for want of a better word, real elections, then would you not agree that politicians would then start listening to students and we would get a lot more political clout for our, more bang for our buck?
I suppose we had I suppose I take that as what I meant to say. We run voter registration drives at a local level in our own union every time we do our elections. Unfortunately, we've had to go through loads of elections and we're now in a bit of a dry spell now, thankfully. We do run those campaigns, we do encourage students to vote. Actually, the survey that we do at the end of every year would include a question around voter participation if we've had an election that year. 50% of our students indicate that they do vote. I don't think that's a bad statistic, considering people out there probably would think it was a lot less. The national unions run national drives, voter student drives, and actually part of the benefit of that is that whenever a union like us that can run a voter registration drive and another union that doesn't have the resources to do it, they can benefit from that national drive. I certainly wouldn't argue about spending £52,000 on one voter drive, but I believe that work's already been done and being done relatively effectively. There's definitely more to be done, but this affiliation, I don't think the two match up.
Proposition?
I don't think they've done a way to put it, except yes, money talks, especially whenever you're mobilising a lot of politically active people, and especially young people who are going to be, especially in this new age where social media is critical to running an effective political campaign. But I think that comes down to the heart of what we were saying. Namely, this is a lot of resources that are purely being held on account of it'll be worse if we leave. The cost to set up an alternative will be worse. But we think that right now, status quo just isn't hacking it. So why should we continue doing the same thing, expecting different results this time? Maybe this reform package will work. But yeah, let's take it forward.
Thank you for that. And any more neutral points on the motion? Any points? Anything you'd like both sides to clarify on, or just any sort of general arguments you'd like to make on the motion? Yourself.
Right. Yeah, speaking also as another person like my honourable friend over there who hasn't even heard of the NUS USI, although has heard of the NUS. Maybe that speaks to its relevance. But I'm still unconvinced whether to disaffiliate or keep affiliating, but I want to propose maybe a different alternative. Maybe disaffiliate, but affiliate more effectively with the sort of all-Ireland student union that could more effectively argue specifically Northern Ireland's points against the NUS. I mean, that could be an interesting point too.
Fine. Anyone like to take that?
I will say this. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of problems with NUS USI. A lot. But actually, the reason NUS USI came to existence, and this is the history of it, was because one year you would get Queen's Students' Union, you would get a majority unionist student representation. And then they said, let's join NUS. The next year you got a majority nationalist on the council, let's join USI. And this pendulum swung backwards and forwards, where NUS and USI said, stuff yous. We're going to take the power out of your hands and we're going to do it ourselves, and we're going to sort the trilateral agreement. So unfortunately I don't think that's going to work, because it'll be repeating of history, but you know, I still think disaffiliated.
That's a good point. You know, that's a good historical point to make. NUS USI does provide that middle ground, but it actually, in addition to that, it provides student officers throughout the further and higher education colleges, institutions, and the president and the members, various members of staff at NUS USI, that extra resource, that extra helping hand, that extra bodies on the ground, even in terms of, not just in Northern Ireland, but in Dublin, if students, if and when students are dealing with educational or financial issues, and again at Westminster as well. So it's a good halfway house. It's best of all three worlds, essentially. And yeah, good points by Nathan too. So it's best of three worlds. That's essentially what I'm saying.
Right, and with that we move to vote. We're going to take two votes tonight. The first vote will be of the audience's opinion prior to the debate. So the first raise your hand and say aye if you were in favour of the proposition before the speaker spoke tonight. Say nay if you're for the opposition. And say meh if you're sort of abstaining on the motion before the speaker spoke tonight. The second vote we'll do is of speaker ability. So who do you think argued their case more convincingly tonight? Again, a simple aye for proposition, nay for opposition, and meh again for. They both vote equally awful or equally wrong. So we'll go for the opinion first. If you'd like to raise your hand and say aye if you thought the proposition beforehand, if you were in favour of the motion beforehand. So.
Based on your own personal opinion. Seven as well.
Yeah. If you'd like to say nay and raise your hands for that.
Nay.
We can't vote.
We can't vote, can we? No, you can't. Yeah, of course you can.
I switched.
You can vote for yourself as much as you want.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Do hands. And abstentions on the motion, if you want to say meh.
Get involved, guys.
Hands nice and high, dudes and gals.
Right, so this vote is the vote on speaker ability. If you think the proposition spoke the best tonight, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Who spoke the best one?
I think it was
You guys?
You can vote for yourself, Nathan, mate.
Yeah.
Well.
We abstain on this one.
and if you thought you could be opposition spoke well tonight, best. No?
You can vote for yourself.
Oh, I can vote for
Yeah, go on.
That's 21. It's a good sign.
Get Chris.
Do whatever you want. It's practically the Labour Party.
And abstention on the motion for people who thought they all spoke equally well.
Per effort.
Fair, half an hour goes by sleep.
Yeah. Don't ruin it.
Really well, though.
Resounding opposition to the motion has failed on prior opinion, and abstentions that have come out of the lead. So that is a failure on the motion. The motion has not passed. And I don't know why I'm sitting down. If you'd like to join us now, thank you very much again to all the speakers who. house will now adjourn to the house bar, which is just up Strand Mills. There'll be warm food and alcohol. What do you want? Yes.
What's next week's debate?
Next week's debate is this house believes transgenderism should no longer be considered a mental disorder. So if you'd like to join us in this room again next week, that's